Om Ajnana-timrahandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So we are in the concluding verses of chapter 9, but I want to take my time to lay out a foundation. So in the previous sessions, when we started with chapter 9 of the second canto, chapter 9 forms, or rather is one of the most important chapters in Srimad Bhagavatam, simply because it gives us a foundation or summarizes the teachings of the Bhagavatam in 4 verses. So the Chatushloki of the Srimad Bhagavatam are verses 2.9.33, 34, 35, and 36. This is in comparison to the Bhagavad Gita's Chatushloki of 10.8 through 10.11. So in the previous verses in the previous session, we learned about the fact that our initiation process is basically following in the footsteps of Lord Brahma. And we have discussed it several times in the previous sessions, that positioning ourselves in terms of consciousness, just as Lord Brahma did, which is to stay in the highest modes of goodness, whilst depending on the Lord, so that the engagement of activity within the material universe doesn't affect his position. That is also our position. So in other words, one who leads also leaves a precept. We follow the Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya Sampradaya. As a consequence, the primary preceptor who leads by demonstration is Lord Brahma. So this chapter also becomes very significant because the inception of our parampara, the starting point of our parampara with Lord Brahma, starts also with the fact that Lord Brahma is demonstrating the process of how one could practically attain the goals of Krishna consciousness. So he's demonstrating it by way of first ensuring that he is basically in the highest mode of goodness. Because he is in the highest mode of goodness, he is not affected by the activities being performed. Now, the second part to it, which is also being seen, is that even though he is in the highest mode of goodness, he recognizes this his inability, or rather his ability to do things according to Krishna's plan and to make an offering that is consistent with Krishna's plan and to understand Krishna's direction requires basically that he develops love, which is basically prema in one of the 4 different mellows. The Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. He basically comes in touch with Krishna in one of the 4 different primary mellows. And as he comes in touch with Krishna in one of the 4 different primary mellows, he also basically is in love with Krishna in that particular mellow. So the establishment of the foundation of love before surrender, before service, is being demonstrated by Lord Brahma. So how does it start? How does this whole process of falling in love begin for Lord Brahma? That is described in this particular chapter in quite some distinct detail. Initially, he hears instructions. The instructions are that you must perform penance, and the penance itself, the word that he hears is tapa. Tapaha is being heard by him, and tapaha literally means that you need to perform penance, you need to follow certain activities that essentially would require that you perform austerities. Why would it be considered an austerity? It is because one hasn't developed taste, just as much as chanting of Harinam is an austerity. Why is it considered an austerity for most devotees who are in the early stages of evolution in their bhakti? It is considered an austerity because they don't have taste. Because there isn't ruchi and there are anarthas, there are other desires. As a consequence, one can't really come very close to Krishna in his Nama Rupa. Basically, Krishna is the same. Yeah. Nama, Naminoho, Abhindatvam. There is no difference between Krishna and his name. So how could we come in touch with Krishna through his name whilst we are impersonal? Because there is a certain degree of impersonalism that is in every one of us as we evolve in bhakti. Impersonalism, for instance, could be seen that when you enter the deity room in a temple, do we all recognize that that is Krishna? Initially, we pay obeisances. We even serve as pujaris. But then, slowly, steadily, there is a certain sense of impersonalism that comes into us where we engage in activities, conversations, we engage in different kinds of, I would say, activities in front of the deity without even realizing that Krishna is standing there. The Archa Vigraha is non-different. The Archa Vigraha is non-different from the Supreme Lord. That is the bona fide aspect of his presence in our world, in the material world. He is present in the form of the Archa Vigraha. He is fully capable of interacting with us, receiving service. This was demonstrated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that those who have faith have the ability to interact with the deity and the deity interacts with them. Yeah? So the point which we're trying to make here is that we are all impersonal to some degree. And as a consequence, when we come in touch with Krishna's Naam, in terms of Harinam, we are impersonal as well, because we don't take it seriously enough. As a consequence, we don't experience any taste, and it becomes a chore, it becomes an austerity. So this whole word, tapaha, which was spoken in the beginning, meant that there was a sense of austerity that was experienced by Lord Brahma. So it was still happening. In other words, his sambandha was still evolving. He wasn't clear as to what the sambandha was. And as a consequence, he was still in a stage which one could call as being preliminary, but he was situated in the highest mode of goodness. As a consequence, he was able to receive directions. He was able to hear these instructions from Krishna to perform tapaha. Tapaha means austerities. Yeah. Sometimes austerities basically can be done voluntarily. Sometimes austerities are being done because someone has instructed us to do. So in his case, he was instructed to perform austerities. In a similar fashion, the spiritual master instructs us to chant a certain number of rounds, follow the regulative principles, and if you are initiated in the second initiation, then you basically also are asked to worship the deity. Now, all of this is considered tapaha because there's a certain degree of being impersonal with our Krishna consciousness. There is a certain degree of impersonalism that is found in us. Yeah, we are impersonal in interacting with Krishna. How are we impersonal? Because we are not sensitive. We are not sensitive. We are not fully acknowledging his presence as a deity all the time. Have you noticed? Go the next time when you go to the temple, notice how you behave. Just notice around 3 hours after you're there, what happens, that we forget that Krishna is there. He is a deity form. Sometimes we are pujaris. Pujaris even forget that Krishna is there in the deity form. There's basically some level of, I would say, impersonalism that comes in because they haven't developed taste and they haven't evolved to fall in love. So the point is, because the spontaneity is not there, because the principle of love has not really set itself fully and established itself in the heart of the devotee, as a consequence, the devotee basically deals with Krishna because as an austerity, and this austerity is being dealt with as an instruction by the spiritual master. The spiritual master instructs the devotee that I'm initiating you, you must chant 16 rounds. And the devotee accepts that instruction. And after accepting the instruction, the devotee basically, Hare Krishna, can you put yourself on mute, please, everyone? Yeah. After accepting the instruction, basically the devotee goes through austerities. Why? Because the austerity itself is required initially before Krishna Sambandha is established. Before falling in love, there's an effort that is required, and that is tapaha, which we noticed in the previous session. How many years of tapaha did Lord Brahma perform? 1,000 years of the celestials. A celestial year is basically 1,000 years in the sense that you can calculate that basically there's 1 year of ours is 1 day of theirs in one sense. So you can talk about a celestial year, which is millions of years in human calculation. And 1,000 years of the celestial years was how many years of tapaha that was performed by Lord Brahma. And what was done? Krishna himself personally instructed him, initiated him in the Gopal mantra. And this Gopal mantra was the personal form of Krishna. So there is tapaha, the instruction of how to come close to him. And then the mantra is being given. And then once the mantra is being given and the devotee is performing austerities to chant the mantra for 1,000 years, Krishna Sambandha is then revealed. We noticed it in the previous session. So we want to basically understand that the process of being able to serve requires Sambandha. Sambandha essentially is required to fall in love. You can't fall in love without knowing who the other person is or not knowing who we are. How could we fall in love if we do not know who we are in relationship to the other person? It's not evident. There might be some attachment, but then how do you fall in love? And there's a different definition of love. Love essentially means that it allows you to surrender. What does surrender mean? Does surrender mean being forced to lift up your hands? You know, someone falls into circumstances that are quite difficult. All you can do is just throw up your hands and say, I'm yours. Do with me as you please. Is that what it means? It's no. Surrender means living for the beloved. Surrender essentially means existing for the beloved. Practically being able to sacrifice and being able to inconvenience ourselves because we specifically want to give pleasure to the senses of the beloved. This is surrender. The servants of Srila Prabhupada experienced surrender because they basically had to adjust to his schedule. They did not have time to chant. They wouldn't have even time to rest properly because by the time they kind of set things up, Srila Prabhupada will be awake again and they'll get on the schedule. So there really wasn't any time. It also meant that you're available 24/7. It's not like you can take a break and say that I can be unavailable or be a little bit, I would say, relaxed for 5 minutes and then Srila Prabhupada would allow me that. No, it was almost as if they're a servant, they're available, and then they basically had to be on call, like an emergency room physician. You know, you have to be on call because there really isn't anything else you can do. So the point being, surrender essentially means making ourselves available to give pleasure to the senses of the beloved. This is basically what we talk about when we use the word surrender. As a consequence, making adjustments to our life and making all kinds of changes that are required, positioning ourselves in such a way that even though our own objectives may or may not work out, in the sense that our own objectives could be compromised in certain ways, we are positioning ourselves to be able to give pleasure to the senses of the other. So this is surrender. But this requires falling in love. How could you position yourself in such a way that you basically exist for the opposite party without being in love? So as a consequence, there has to be a history of love before there can be surrender. So this is very important. So how is this love going to happen? How is someone going to fall and experience prema? How are they going to experience prema? That is basically the process of sadhana. We start with sadhana. We receive faith, just as much as Lord Brahma received faith. Yeah, he received the instruction tapaha without knowing where it came from. He took it into his heart. Hare Krishna, he took it into his heart, and then basically he started doing his chanting for 1,000 years, and the mantra evolved his relationship because the mantra was non-different from Krishna. The mantra purified him. The mantra Nama developed Rupa and Guna. You see, Nama, Rupa, Guna. Yeah, you have the Nama given to us first, Harinam, and then as we chant very sincerely, then we understand the nature of Harinam, which is Nama, Rupa, Guna. Then we also participate in Leela, Nama, Rupa, Guna, Leela. So first we start with Nam, and then we go all the way to Leela. So the whole process of Prema Bhakti starts with receiving faith from those who already have faith, because one who doesn't have faith does not have the ability to give faith. So whenever we speak of giving faith, we are giving faith to the extent to which we have faith. So because faith is also, in one sense, I would say it's a commodity, not to minimize what it is, but just to understand that it's a commodity or a wealth or a storehouse of wealth that unless you own it, you can't distribute it. You can't really distribute something that you don't have, and you can only distribute to the extent to which you have. So as a consequence, we receive faith from those who have faith, then we engage in bhajana kriya, which is tapaha. tapaha essentially means that we take it up because the spiritual master has instructed us to do so. Then we go through inconveniences because the spiritual master has instructed us to do so. And then slowly, steadily, we give up the aspects of our life that are interfering in certain ways with the objective of serving Krishna's senses. We slowly, steadily eliminate those aspects of our existence which are interfering with prema, because ultimately service can't be given without being in love, without being surrendered. So we are slowly, steadily progressing there. And the process of eliminating those aspects of our existence that do not have specific contribution, positive contribution to Krishna consciousness is anartha nivritti. Anartha is that which has no meaning. Now, anarthas have a quality. The quality of anarthas, specifically, if you were to talk about quality of consciousness, anarthas fall in the quality of passion and ignorance. So, nashta prayeshu, abhadreshu. Abhadreshu is inauspicious. That which is inauspicious is passion and ignorance. So, these are low-class qualities of consciousness. Those low-class qualities are removed during the process of anartha nivritti. So one needs to be situated in the position of Lord Brahma, where there's an opportunity, which is to be in the higher modes of goodness. There is still some contamination because the sadhana is not complete. There's still some contamination, but it gives you the opportunity to fully dovetail our efforts towards the sadhana process. So at the stage of anartha nivritti, where you've completed the removal of passion and ignorance from influencing ourselves, where our consciousness has moved from a mixture of goodness, passion, and ignorance to predominantly being goodness, which is the higher level of consciousness within the material world, then one has the ability to contribute fully to their devotional service, to most part. And at that point, there's acceleration. So the distance between nishta and bhava is not a long distance. It is achieved within somewhat of a very, very short time frame compared to what the whole process of anartha nivritti, which is to cast away and move forward and rise ourselves in consciousness from the lower levels of passion, ignorance to the highest level of goodness. Now, once we are reaching the highest level of goodness and we are engaging in sadhana bhakti, in other words, we are engaging, still continuing sadhana bhakti, then there is an opportunity for us to recognize who we are. There's an opportunity for us to recognize who is the beloved. There's an opportunity for us to recognize the relationship. And in that opportunity, one also develops love, and that is the objective. So slowly, steadily from nishta becoming fixed, because now there is no passion, ignorance, which is going to make us unstable. Becoming fixed nishta requires the elimination of passion, ignorance. Then one has the ability to move forward in leaps and bounds, and then they reach the point of developing taste. They also reach the point of developing, I would say, attachment because of taste, which is ashakti. And then loving emotions start coming into our heart, which is bhava. As bhava condenses, just as much as, if you keep, heating up milk and you want to make some kind of a very condensed version of milk, the condensed milk sweets like sandesh or, whatever it is made with condensed milk. The condensation process is such that it becomes thicker and thicker and thicker. So bhava, which is the initial point of falling in love and experiencing higher emotions, after understanding the relationship between us and Krishna at the highest mode of goodness, which is still interspersed at an imperceptible level with passion and ignorance, it slowly, steadily, one develops the ability to go into transcendence. And the condensation of bhava results in prema. Yeah. So there is the emotions that and the loving emotions that are experienced. And loving emotions are experienced. Nama that was chanted develops the qualities where we understand Rupa and Guna. First, we understand Krishna by Nama. We hear the word Krishna. We hear that is Nama, Rupa. Then we understand Guna. Then slowly, steadily, at the higher levels of Krishna consciousness, one is able to first visualize Leela. Then one is able to participate in Leela because now they know how they are supposed to participate. So this is a very, very strictly, I would say, very beautifully defined process that is similarly experienced, not the same, it is similar because different people have different levels of acceleration. So one would say it is similarly experienced amongst the class of devotees. But it requires that you fall in love first. And then it requires surrendering ourselves. And surrendering ourselves is not a circumstance where we find ourselves in this world with no other avenue and we throw up our hands, and then that is definitely one definition of surrender. But if you really want to understand surrender after love, surrender means making ourselves fully available for the beloved to give pleasure to the senses of the beloved. As a consequence, we become unmindful of the tribulations that one faces because they want to readjust and constantly improvise their ability to be able to give pleasure to the senses of the beloved. So that is surrender from the perspective of love and surrender. Then there can be some proper service because there is active consideration. The person is in love and he is actively, he or she is changing the way they were looking at the world so they could position themselves to being able to give pleasure to the beloved. And as a consequence, then there can be some service. So the concept of service starts after love and surrender. Whilst we are getting there, we are in the process of anartha nivritti. This is basically the process of eliminating the influence of passion and ignorance. Look into your hearts, and if you have desires that are troubling us during japa, that are not connected to Krishna consciousness, if there are desires that are constantly assaulting us at different levels because it doesn't allow us to basically fully absorb ourselves in the process of service, then understand that these belong to the quality of passion and ignorance. And these desires themselves will slowly, steadily be understood, eliminated, processed when we reach the end of anartha nivritti, which is basically to become fixed, which essentially means that you have traversed passion, you have traversed ignorance, you have traversed passion, and you're now in the goodness part. There is some imperceptible influence of passion, but that can easily be overwhelmed because there is predominant goodness. Then, as we go further, then we are predominated by Shuddha Sattva, where there is absolutely no question of being influenced by passion and ignorance. This is when we have crossed over to the other side. But whilst we are here, even though we haven't crossed over, there definitely is a lot of interaction with the spiritual sky. And there's a lot of, I would say, clarity in terms of how we should proceed further if one reaches the point of becoming fixed, once the anartha nivritti process is over. Yeah? Once the anartha nivritti process is over, then everything is basically easier. Now, the point we want to make here is that Lord Brahma goes through tapaha. This is forced because there isn't taste in the beginning. Then there's purification. Then there is sambandha gyan, which is being received by Lord Brahma. Krishna practically holds on to Lord Brahma's hands. In the Bhagavatam, it is said that Krishna is shaking Lord Brahma's hands. Perhaps shaking of Brahma's hands is not to be construed as how we have witnessed the shaking of hands to greet each other in this world, in the West especially, because in the Eastern Hemisphere, they generally don't touch each other. They greet each other from a distance. Unless you're very proximate, they don't touch. And in that sense, to understand what this means by the shaking of hands, it is more a matter of Krishna holding on to Lord Brahma's hands, yeah, coming in touch with him by holding on to his hands. It is then revealed that Lord Brahma is being treated as a friend because this Lord Brahma who is offering prayers is in Sakya Bhav. Because he is experiencing Sakyaras, he's being treated as a friend. And as a consequence, Krishna is holding on to his hand. Just as a friend would hold on to the hand of a friend, he is just holding on to his hand and he is having a conversation. And then he is answering certain questions. Those questions become, those answers become the Chatushloki. Those are the 33, 34, 35, 36 verses of this chapter. But we'll just take a look at the questions and then we will go through from 15. We left at 15 and then we'll go from 15 last week to the verse 30 or 31. And then what we would do is the next week, we will handle the rest of this chapter, which is the Chatushloki. I just wanted to leave one entire session for the Chatushloki, and then we could do it the subsequent session, which is the session that's coming up now. But we will just do from 15 onwards. So, devotees, we are doing chapter 9 of the second canto, and we are reading from verse 15. Verse 15, chapter 9 of the second canto. Lord Brahma saw in the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, and who is served by the foremost servitors, like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabala, and Arhana, his immediate associates. This is Vaikuntha, not necessarily Goloka. These are the servants of the Lord in Vaikuntha. Yeah, this is basically, in Vaikuntha, the predominant bhav is Dasya. The reason why the predominant bhav is Dasya is because Krishna in Vaikuntha is displaying himself fully with his Aishwarya. All opulences are seen in Vaikuntha. There's great sweetness, but then the sweetness of the Lord is overwhelmed by the opulence. So the Madhurya, in this sense, I'm using Madhurya to indicate sweetness. This is completely overwhelmed by the Aishwarya. And as a consequence, when one has that kind of an overwhelming effect of the opulence of the Lord, which is unimaginable power, unimaginable beauty, unimaginable knowledge, unimaginable strength, unimaginable renunciation and knowledge, etc., then there are 6 different opulences and the other siddhis and all kinds of powers. They are all basically very dominant. Yeah, when they're very dominant, then there's Aishwarya. The Lord basically is seen by others as a superior very distinctly. When you see someone very formally as a superior, and there's a lot of protocol surrounding the interaction with such an individual, then the predominant bhava or mellow in that circumstance is Dasya. So Lakshman, the brother of Lord Sri Ram, he experiences a tremendous amount of, I would say, distress because of the long, very, very large distance. He wants to serve the Lord. He served. The example of service, Dasya Bhav, is seen in Sri Ramayana, exemplified by Hanumanji and Lakshman. Hanumanji and Lakshman, they were very intimate, very, very close, because they saw in themselves brotherhood in service to Lord Sri Ram. So they were very intimate in that regard, that they basically saw in themselves the brotherhood in service to Lord Sri Ram. But Lakshmanji, he felt as if, he felt a lot of distance. Why was such distance experienced? Because Lord Ram appeared as a king, and a king basically is governed by protocol. You can't really, be very, I would say, casual with a king. And even if you're a brother, there's a certain protocol in how you talk to him, how you deal with him, because those who surround him treat him in a certain way. So if you break that protocol, then it disturbs the atmosphere. So in that sense, when Lord Sri Brahma saw Krishna, when he saw Narayan, when he saw Vishnu in the Vaikuntha planets, he was predominated by Sakya, but Krishna introduced that Sakya. The Lord himself came and held on to his hands. But before that, Lord Brahma basically had deep dasya in his heart. So even if you are a brother in the Vaikuntha planets, you're still predominated by servitude, because there's protocol. You can't really jump over protocol. As a consequence, the safest, I would say, bhav in which one would deal with the Lord in the Vaikuntha planets would be servitude, dasya. So you see Mother Lakshmi, she is the consort of the Lord. Here in Vraja, Krishna sometimes gets beaten up by the gopis. There are certain pastimes where you could see that Krishna basically is chastised in certain ways. They basically, bring some kind of, I would say, chastisement onto him. Here he's dominated by the gopis. In Vaikuntha, that is not the case. In Vaikuntha, Krishna, Hare Krishna. Yeah. So in Vaikuntha, that is not the case. In Vaikuntha, you see Mother Lakshmi. She is basically engaging in dasya, in servitude. She is his consort, but she is always basically engaged in the padasevanam, the service of engaging in massaging his lotus feet, which is one sense that, it is predominated by the mellow of dasya, because externally one observes that even though there is sweetness, there's an attachment to the Lord as a consort, but yet what is externally seen and what is predominated, that is dasya. So in Vaikuntha, basically, because of the fact that there's so much protocol, you can't really engage with the Lord with intimacy. And this was basically experienced by Lakshman. And it is said that Lakshman basically felt very, very intensely wanting to, engage in very intimate relationships with his brother. And that is how Balaram and Lakshman, Balaram and Krishna interacted in both Sakya. There was Vatsalya, there's Dasya. There are so many different things which Balaram experiences with Krishna in Krishna Leela. But then in Lord Ram's Leela, it is pure Dasya. So that is also being said there in the sense that it is an evolution of desires, which basically is seen from one avatar or one particular yuga to the other in terms of the manifestation of relationship. But here you notice that the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, and who is served by the foremost servitors like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabala, and Arana, his immediate associates. These are Dasya Bhav devotees. Verse 16, the personality of God had seen leaning favorably towards his loving servitors, his very sight intoxicating and attractive, appeared to be very much satisfied. He had a smiling face, decorated with an enchanting reddish hue. He was dressed in yellow robes and wore earrings and a helmet on his head. He had 4 hands, and his chest was marked with the lines of the goddess of fortune. Yeah, it's called the Srivatsa, the lines of the goddess of fortune. The goddess of fortune always resides in the heart of the Lord. So that particular mark is also a very distinct feature of the Supreme Lord. Now, they say that he was decorated with an enchanting reddish hue. So he is the color of dark clouds. He is the color of rain-bearing clouds, but there's also a reddish hue that comes forth from him. So it is an unimaginably beautiful color. So it's not essentially black. Krishna Varnam. Krishna Varnam is basically dark. This is not black, black as in the material sense, black and white. This is basically dark bluish, like the rain-bearing clouds, but there's also a reddish hue, which is interspersed. So maybe there is a reddish hue, which basically predominates in combination with that very, very dark cloud, bluish features of the Lord. So it seems to be an extraordinary description. Verse 17. The Lord was seated on his throne. So here, this is opulence, Aishwarya. He was seated on his throne and was surrounded by different energies like the 4, the 16, the 5, and the 6 natural opulences, along with other insignificant energies of the temporary character. But he was the factual Supreme Lord enjoying his own abode. So the 4 principles is Prakriti, Purusha, Mahatattva, and ego. Prakriti is both the internal and the external potencies. Purusha, which is himself, the 4th principle. You see, the principle of Purusha is the principle of being the enjoyer. Prakriti is that which is enjoyed. So there is Prakriti, which is the internal, external potencies, and then there is also Purusha. Then the Mahatattva. The Mahatattva, very simply put, is like clay that hasn't taken on a variegated appearance. The Buddhist practitioners, their goal is to reach the Mahatattva because they believe that once you make the variegated, once the nature of material energy becomes variegated, then there's pain. Yeah. So how do you avoid pain? You basically remove the variegatedness. Yeah. Nirvisesha, Shunyavad. You just basically remove the variegatedness. Because you remove the variegatedness, they basically worship, or rather their objective is to reach the Mahatattva and practically remove and live in an existence which is not variegated at all. It is actually, in one sense, it is not so much the reaching of Godhead. It is more a matter of removing one kind of suffering, because if you have such deep knowledge about variegated natures of relationships in this world, and then the relationships themselves have a duality, because you see people, sometimes people exist in your life and sometimes they disappear. It gives a lot of grief. And this is basically the nature of variegated manifestations of the Mahatattva. Yeah, the Mahatattva is like clay. Yeah, the clay, when it takes on different shapes because of consciousness, is practically representing different relationships, which can also cause misery because they have a beginning and an end. The Buddhist concept is to ultimately go and have an existence of nirvisesha, non-variegatedness. And their mantras predominantly are also designed to lead them to the Mahatattva. Their mantras basically are designed for the Mahatattva. There are personalities who are surrounding the Lord, Krishna's energies, Krishna's Shaktis, with different responsibilities. One of them manages the Mahatattva as well, the primordial nature. The Buddhist mantras are directed towards the primordial nature, the Shakti who dominates the primordial nature. And as a consequence, their objective is to reach her abode where there is absolutely no variegatedness. It's nirvisesha, it's shunyavad. Basically, they've ended their suffering because there is no variegatedness. But it is almost atheistic, I would say. It's an atheistic concept because they don't accept the existence of the Supreme, but they want this objective with no variegatedness, and they consider their objective to be Supreme. So it's a very, very kind of very, very low level, I would say, in terms of achievements, because it is at a very, very early stage of what the material universe is. They basically worship the Mahatattva. So now you have Prakriti, which is the internal, external potencies. You have Purusha, who is Krishna, and then you have the Mahatattva, which is the sculpey clay, if you will. Yeah, if you buy sculpey clay, it has not taken on a variegated appearance. It is a lump of clay, and then there's someone managing the lump of clay before it takes variegated appearance. And that personality is an expansion of Krishna's Shaktis, potencies. As a consequence, there is also a representation being given here as the Mahatattva. And then ego. Ego is basically that which comes in touch with material energy. You develop ego because you develop an identity because of the variegatedness. Because you're in a certain body, you develop an identity. Now, if you're in a certain body, you have an ego. Yeah, it is false ego because it's temporary. It is false ego because if you believe in this to such an extent that you don't use it in the real ego, then it becomes false ego. There is ego. Ego means identity. Yeah, we don't want to really say that we don't exist as an identity. We have an identity, which is the true identity of being servants of the Lord. Yeah, but there is the false ego. False ego is that which is assumed to be the identity. Who breaks us out of false ego? Ahankar. Who is it who can attract us out of the mess of Ahankar? Ahankar is when we identify with this particular body and start thinking that all the extensions of this body are myself. And this covers over the identity of who we are in relationship to Krishna. It is not false. It is not false in the sense this is real. As it exists, my speaking to you in this body is real. You know me as Sri Vrindavan Das. Yeah? So this is real, but it is temporary. I am not Sri Vrindavan Das in the eternal sense. Meaning that I may have other names in the spiritual world. Right? So in that sense, what I'm saying is there is a certain temporary nature to this existence, and believing in the temporary nature to the point where that dominates us is called false ego. But then there is real ego. Real ego is our identity in the spiritual sky. The real ego and the identity in the spiritual sky is what we want to get to. Who is it who really, as we would call it, pricks this bubble or balloon of false ego? Who is it who puts an end to it? Balaram. Sankarshana. Sankarshana has the ability to attract us through the form of the Guru, through the form of Nam, through the form of all that is Sat. The Sandhini potency of Balaram can attract us through all that is Sat, all that is eternal, and gives us an eternal connection with Krishna. The eternal connection of Krishna is a true ego. The temporary connection is the false ego. So, Lord Brahma saw Krishna surrounded by the different personalities who are serving in different capacities. So there's Prakriti, Purusha, Mahatattva, and ego. What else did he see? He saw him surrounded by 16. Yeah? What is the meaning of the 16? 16 is 5 elements, the 5 different types of elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Then you have the 5 perceptive sense organs, the eyes, ear, nose, tongue, and skin. This is how we come in touch with the objects of the senses. And then the working sense organs, the hands, legs, the stomach, the evacuation center, and the genitals. And then we also have the 5 different objects of the senses: form, taste, smell, sound, and touch. These 25 items are the different coverings of the particular soul, which has to be penetrated by sadhana. We are covered over by 25 layers, each more subtle than the other. And we have to penetrate these 25 different layers through sadhana to reach the point of us being able to claim our identity with Krishna. It is not easy to do. It requires mercy. It requires mercy, and it requires effort. The effort itself takes the form of sadhana bhakti, which constantly brings us in touch with Krishna. Krishna himself is the vastu. When we come in touch with the real deal, we slowly, steadily, because of the extraordinary power of the real deal, which is Krishna, we lose these layers of confusion. Yeah? We lose these layers of confusion. We are able to penetrate through 25 different layers. Now, there's a personification, and this personification is being seen here in this particular verse. The verse itself says, the Lord was seated on his throne, and he was surrounded by different energies, like the 4, the 16, the 5, and the 6 natural opulences. The 6 natural opulences themselves. Yeah? 6 natural opulences of Krishna himself. That is, he's the richest, he's the most powerful, most famous, most knowledgeable, most beautiful, and the most renounced, because he is not affected by these opulences, he is not affected by his own creation. So Balaram's role as Guru, the Adi Guru, the role of Lord Shiva, what does Lord Shiva do? He is also the spiritual master of the whole world. He destroys ignorance. How does he destroy ignorance? As Rudra, he basically destroys this body. He destroys the entire creation at the time of annihilation. This is false, temporary. As a consequence, it is false. It is real, but it is false because it doesn't belong to the category of the spiritual world. It is not Sat. Lord Shiva, as Rudra, destroys this creation. As Rudra, he destroys our body. Yeah? As Lord Shiva himself, as a spiritual master, he separates us. He separates the soul from the subtle body. Yeah? He separates the soul from the subtle body. It is a soul which travels to the spiritual sky. The subtle body is also a body that exists within the material sphere. So something has to end there as well, that connection, before the soul transfers itself to the spiritual sky. When does the subtle body take place? When does it come into being? It comes into being in the mode of goodness. When can you resolve the subtle body? You can resolve it only in the mode of goodness. You cannot resolve the subtle body in the mode of ignorance. You have to resolve the issues because you're in touch with false ego, you're in touch with the mind for so many millions of lifetimes. You cannot really uncreate this covering in the lower levels of consciousness. You need to unentangle yourself in the mode of goodness, because it was created in the mode of goodness. This whole concept of who I am came into being in the mode of goodness. The false ego creates the mind in the mode of goodness. If you want to fix your mental issues anyway, in other words, if you want to ensure that we don't have issues with the mind telling us that there's something else which is more important, you need to come to the mode of goodness, because we can't resolve them in the mode of passion and ignorance. It's impossible. Yeah? So this is basically quite fascinating to see that there is so much which has already been arranged. And the Guru, Adi Guru Balaram, his expansion, Lord Shiva, and then the spiritual master who attracts us through the power of Balaram. Sankarshana is all about the power of attraction, Akarshana Shakti. So the Guru has the ability to attract us. He carries the power of Balaram. He attracts us so that we could serve his beloved, Krishna. So this is what Balaram is doing. He is using the Guru to attract those so that we could serve, we could serve Krishna. He celebrated Balaram Jayanti. Yeah, this is basically the role of Balaram, the Adi Guru. he has no pleasure, Balramji has no pleasure in doing anything other than wanting to serve. He has his own group of friends. He has his own group of, I would say, gopis as well. There's Rasa dance. He has his own Rasa Yatra. But for him, none of this matters more than service to Krishna, because that's where he really feels happy. He doesn't have any other happiness. Yeah? He participates in all of this with his devotees. There are those who are specifically attracted to him. He has his own group of people. But at the same time, his attraction is serving Krishna. Their attraction is also to serve Krishna, but basically they want to be with him. They are attracted to him. Lord Brahma, thus seeing the personality of Godhead in his fullness, was overwhelmed with joy within his heart, and thus in full transcendental love and ecstasy. Yeah, this is so wonderful, because they were practically saying Lord Brahma is displaying symptoms of ecstasy, bhava. Yeah, Lord Brahma, thus seeing the personality of Godhead in his fullness, was overwhelmed. So there is Nama. He was chanting for 1,000 years Krishna Nama. Then there was Rupa, Guna Leela. Yeah, with joy in his heart, and thus in full transcendental love and ecstasy, his eyes filled with tears of love. Now Lord Brahma is experiencing ecstasies of prema. He thus bowed down before the Lord. That is the way of the highest perfection for the living being. This is the highest perfection, Sambandha. Understanding Krishna Sambandha, understanding who we are, understanding who is Krishna, falling in love, and then being able to serve in complete surrender. He's experiencing that. And thus seeing Brahma present before him, the Lord accepted him as worthy to create living beings, to be controlled as he desired, and thus being much satisfied with him, the Lord shook hands with Brahma and slightly smiling, addressed him thus. So here's where it's saying, Lord Vishnu, Lord Narayan, Lord Brahma's boss, Garbhodakashai Vishnu, he shook hands with him, and he is basically addressing him. The beautiful personality of Godhead addressed Lord Brahma. O Brahma, impregnated with the Vedas, I am very much pleased with your long accumulated penance with the desire for creation. Hardly am I pleased with the pseudo mystics. So, Lord Brahma wanted to serve in the process of playing the role of Brahma. He wanted to serve. But then to serve, he needs to be in love. He needs to surrender, which is what we saw. Now Krishna is saying, O Brahma, impregnated with the Vedas, I am very much pleased with your long accumulated penance. So there's tapaha, to develop love, ultimately to know how to serve, because without Krishna Sambandha, how will you serve your master if you do not know who you are and you do not know who he is? How will those desires be understood? So here Krishna is saying, I'm very pleased. And he's saying, hardly am I pleased with the pseudo-mystics, because their objective is not to serve. The pseudo-mystics don't have the objective of wanting to serve. They are not. They are basically wanting, rather they're captured by the display of power within the material sphere. So here he says, I wish you good luck, O Brahma. You may ask from me, the giver of all benediction, all that you may desire. You may know that the ultimate benediction as a result of all penances is to see me by realization. He says the ultimate benediction is to see him by realization. See him by realization, practically being able to experience the presence of the Lord, pratyaksha, praman. Praman is no longer shabda, told by others. No longer is it made in an inference, anuman. Yes, there must be a powerful person who is behind all of this. This is called anuman, yeah, inference. We are making an inferential statement saying there's someone behind all of this and who is supreme. Shabda is what we hear from others, but now this is pratyaksha praman, where Lord Brahma is able to see the Lord, and the Lord says that is perfection. Because now he chanted Nama, Rupa, now he will understand Guna, and he will also understand, participate in Leela. So he's basically reached from one level to the other. The highest perfectional ingenuity is the personal perception of my abodes, and this has been possible because of your submissive attitude in the performance of severe penance according to my order. Now, he is here, even for Lord Brahma, the statement being made here is, you achieved this because I gave you mercy. Why did I give you mercy? I gave you mercy because you're submissive and you followed my orders and you engaged in severe penance. So he is saying, pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, you're basically engaging in a submissive attitude in the performance of severe penance. And according to my order, and as a consequence, you have a personal perception of my abodes. The Bhagavatam, when it is describing the Vaikuntha planets, as it was done in the previous session, or it is describing the form of the Lord, or it is describing Leela, this is real because there has been personal perception, pratyaksha praman, by Vyasadeva. When he wrote, he saw, or rather he saw first and then he wrote. So there was personal perception. So here, that is the perfection of penance. That is the perfection of sadhana. And that is basically received through mercy because someone is following orders and engaging in sadhana to basically following orders and engaging in sadhana to please the Lord. So he's receiving mercy. Even Brahma has to have mercy. Even Lord Brahma needs mercy. It's quite significant. O sinless Brahma, you may know from me that it was I who first ordered you to undergo penance when you were perplexed in your duty. Such penance is my heart and soul, and therefore penance and I are non-different. So such penance is my heart and soul, and therefore penance and I are non-different. Such penance, what does such penance refer to? If there is penance which is ultimately going to lead us to the Lord, then there is no difference between such penance and the Lord himself. What did Lord Brahma do? He chanted the Gopal mantra for 1,000 years. The Gopal mantra, which is Nam, transformed itself into Rupa, Guna, and Leela. Yeah? The form of the Lord, where he was, and how he engaged in his devotees, all of this is revealed because it is basically starting with Nam. Now, this is exactly what we do with Harinam. So there is sadhana, and then there is sadhya. There is no difference between sadhana and sadhya because the sadhana itself is to reach the goal. And there's no difference. We are chanting to reach the goal of prema, and we experience prema through the chanting of Harinam. Yeah? We experience prema through the chanting of Harinam. So the chanting process doesn't stop. The chanting process doesn't stop. Our consciousness evolves, and there's greater and greater and greater level of awareness. And the experiences become even more profound, and we finally reach a stage where we are able to experience the true nature of Nam. The moment you say Krishna, Shyam Sundar should appear. With his consort Radharani, there should be Leela. The moment you say the word Krishna, there is the appearance of the divine couple. So that's how Nam becomes Nama Rupa Guna Leela. So there is no difference between the sadhana and sadhya, especially when it is ordered by the Lord and when you are chanting Nam. Nam. So here he's saying there's no difference. That kind of penance, there is no difference. I create this cosmos by such penance. I maintain it by the same energy, and I withdraw it all by the same energy. Therefore, the potential power is penance only. I create this cosmos by such penance. I maintain it by the same energy, and I withdraw it all by the same energy. Therefore, the potential power is penance only. What is this all about? This is basically his point about his internal potency. The internal potency is how he maintains everything. The internal potency is the same potency. The counterpart is basically the external potency, but the internal potency, Krishna's power, the more superior power, is how there is maintenance, destruction, and creation. And as a consequence, this is basically, it's penance because this is internal potency. Yeah? He's basically saying that the internal potency that you experience by chanting my name and understanding me by my Nam, Roop, Guna, Leela is the same internal potency through which I create, maintain, and destroy. So he's basically talking about the same thing. Because this is basically Yogamaya when he wants to interact with his subjects, with his souls. But if they are distant and they're not cooperating, then it is external energy. But when they want to interact with him, it is internal potency. Lord Brahma said, O personality of Godhead, you're situated in every living entity's heart as the supreme director, and therefore you are aware of all endeavors by your superior intelligence, without any hindrance whatsoever. In spite of that, my Lord, I'm praying to you to kindly fulfill my desire. May I please be informed how, in spite of your transcendental form, you assume the mundane form, although you have no such form at all. He's referring to the universal form. So what we need to do is we're going to go into the answers to these questions in the subsequent session, because the answers to these questions are the Chatushloki. But in this session, we're going to end this session shortly by reading the questions. In spite of that, this is Lord Brahma's first question. In spite of that, my Lord, I'm praying to you to kindly fulfill my desire. May I please be informed how, in spite of your transcendental form, you're transcendental, you assume the mundane form, which is a universal form, although you have no such form at all. It's quite a question. And please inform me how you, by your own self, manifest different energies for annihilation, generation, acceptance, and maintenance by combination and permutation. You can say combination and permutation is, the Brahma Samhita talks about Lord Shiva being an altered state of the Supreme Lord. Lord Shiva is not Jiva Tattva, but neither can you call him fully Vishnu Tattva. There's practically, in one sense, there is no difference in one sense. The difference is that if Krishna is compared to milk, which is the word used in Brahma Samhita is Shira, then Lord Shiva is Dadi. So there's a certain permutation, there's a certain combination, and Krishna manages the material universes through the agency of Lord Shiva. Yeah? So there's a little bit of, I would say, a change that occurs, even though there's no difference. So the question relates to how those permutations and combinations occur. So first, Lord Brahma is asking about the universal form. Second, he is asking about the guna avatars. O master of all energies, please tell me philosophically all about them. You play like a spider that covers itself by its own energy, and your determination is infallible. Why is a spider being used here? A spider is quite significant. A spider, as an insect, is self-sufficient. If it wants to capture a prey, the spider web is a secretion of its own saliva. So it doesn't go around gathering ingredients to create a web. It is practically self-sufficient in its ability to, maintain itself. So there's a comparison which is being made with the spider. Please tell me so that I may be taught in the matter by the instruction of the personality of Godhead, and may thus act instrumentally to generate living entities without being conditioned by such activities. So there's real fear. What is this fear of Lord Brahma? He is afraid because he's received the gift of Sambandha Gyan. When is it that we don't fear? We don't fear if we don't have anything. You see, we are paupers. As a consequence, we don't have fear. Here, Lord Brahma has received Sambandha Gyan. He has received this very special connection with Krishna. He has now become fearful because he's afraid that if he does anything wrong, he may lose the gift of Sambandha, because some kind of illusion would cover him and he wouldn't be able to remember, and he wouldn't be able to basically maintain that extraordinary relationship going forward. He is wanting to protect something extraordinarily precious. Devotees are casual about Krishna consciousness to the extent to which they have not received it fully. If they do not know what is Krishna consciousness fully, or even if it doesn't matter whether you're initiated or not, if you don't receive Krishna consciousness in your heart, basically, if you haven't really understood and developed that gift of Krishna consciousness, we don't even know what we have. As a consequence, our perception, our activities in this world, our priorities, they're all very, very different because we haven't really understood what's been given to us. Here, Lord Brahma is afraid. He is afraid because he has received Sambandha. He now knows he's been receiving prema. He knows this was extraordinary mercy. He is experiencing ecstasies of bhava. He is experiencing the connection with Krishna. He is saying, now I have received all of this. You're wanting me to engage with the material world. What if I do something which is basically going to overwhelm me? Because he has also understood the power of Krishna's external energy. So he's asking him, please tell me so that I may be taught in the matter by the instruction of the personality of Godhead. and may thus act instrumentally to generate living entities without being conditioned by such activities. He is afraid of being conditioned. This is real, this fear. It's palpable. It is real because he has received a gift. That's why it's real. He's afraid to lose it. Oh, my Lord, the unborn, you have shaken hands with me just as a friend does with a friend, as if equal in position. I shall be engaged in the creation of different types of living entities, and I shall be occupied in your service. I shall have no perturbation, but I pray that all of this may not give rise to pride, as if I were the supreme. Again, Lord Brahma's fear. He has received a gift, so he knows that false pride is dangerous. He is begging that false pride doesn't affect him. So we're going to stop here. That's verse 30. We stopped at verse 30. We will begin with 31 in the subsequent session. We will cover the Chatushloki. Next session would be 31 through the end of the chapter. That will cover the Chatushloki, the four essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the verses that describe Srimad Bhagavatam, 4 verses. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and I will take questions or comments if you have any. Any questions or comments so far?
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
I have a question. You say you need to surrender, but you can only do by developing the love. So how can I go ahead with that? How can I proceed? Did you hear my question?
Actually, it wasn't clear, Mataji. If you can repeat your question, please.
In the beginning, you mentioned that you can only develop the love by surrendering to the Lord, right?
Actually, sorry to cut you off. I mentioned that you need to fall in love first before you can develop surrender. It is the other way around.
Oh,
yeah.
So how do we go ahead with this process?
It is basically the process of sadhana bhakti, of chanting Harinam. The whole process of sadhana bhakti itself is going to allow us to be able to ultimately reach the point of being able to understand our nature, understand our relationship with Krishna, and eventually bring us to the point of being able to love him and also surrender and serve him. It is sadhana. It is the chanting of Harinam. If there is any particular process, I would say there is 5 different main ways to do it. First and foremost, one has to come in touch with deep faith, sadhu sangha. One has to desire sadhu sangha, and one desires sadhu sangha so that one could serve sadhus. The second is for us to be able to engage in nama smaran, nama kirtan. Third is to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. Fourth is basically to worship the deity. And the fifth is to develop desires to stay in the eternal Dham of Vrindavan, Mayapur, etc. So these are 5 different ways in which one engages in sadhana, which is the predominant way to offer ourselves. As one does it diligently according to the instructions of the spiritual master, one reaches a point of being able to understand the relationship. Once they understand the relationship, slowly, steadily, they also have the ability to fall in love and then give themselves in totality to the Lord and his service.
I've been hearing a lot about that we have a relationship, that we are a servitor, or we should serve in a dasya bhava, which we've been trying, but there's no sign of developing any kind of love or attachment. So something must be going wrong in my sadhana.
Well, one of the ways for us to understand it is that we are all in a stage where we are moving forward. There could be a necessity for us to basically engage in a deeper level of chanting and making some improvements in what we are already doing. So what we must do is we must examine what we are doing on a day-to-day basis and see how we could improve. And then we should simultaneously offer prayers to Krishna's servants, the spiritual master. And that in turn would allow us to be able to move forward. So the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, there's room for immense improvement. And that improvement itself requires us to introspect and find out how we could improve in our sadhana. And as we make improvements, we should constantly come back and see if it is giving us what the desired effects are. If there has been an improvement in sadhana bhakti, one should develop a deeper taste in wanting sadhu sangha. If there has been an improvement in sadhana bhakti, one should develop some deeper taste in wanting to chant Harinam. If there is an improvement in sadhana bhakti, one should be able to have a deeper taste in wanting to hear Srimad Bhagavatam and worship the deity, etc. There should be some increase in some spontaneous activity of wanting to come closer to Krishna by increasing in all these activities. So if that doesn't happen, then we need to see how we could improve our sadhana and then go back to seeing how many other changes that we need to make. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is a process where we make an attempt, we look for changes in the positive direction and improvements of sadhana. If we don't see distinct changes, we go back and make improvements. If we see distinct changes, we again increase in the same direction so that we are able to move forward. We seek out help from those whom we are, I would say, whom we have a connection to. Yeah. If there are devotees whom you are connected to, whom you know personally who are senior, seek help from them to share your heart and wanting help. And I'm sure that there are going to be so many wonderful opportunities to, receive what is required by coming in touch with devotees as well.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Wish you the best.
Oh, I need your blessing. I definitely need your blessings because I do want to improve my sadhana and I do want to develop the love for Krishna. I'm really, really fed up of this world. That much is sure. But still, I'm not making any headway in my tapasya or penance or anything. And that is what making me more rosy in my life.
Yeah, well, the first and good sign is to be tired of this world, because that's also a very good sign. To be tired of this world is a very good sign. It's a pre-qualification for one to be able to move forward. So in that sense, I would say that you are in a good place. Now what you need to do is basically, come in touch more and more with devotees and then engage in seva and then seek their help as well. I'm sure Krishna will assist you. Lord Chaitanya will assist you in your process and your determination. So my prayers are with you.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, it's an understatement. I know the Mataji who's speaking. She's one of the best book distributor in London. And she's been practicing. She's a pujari for the last 15, 20 years. And excellent preacher. So that is an understatement, what she's saying.
Which is also a very good sign that she's basically still wanting help, even though she is making progress, which is also an extraordinary sign. So you're very blessed in that sense. Yes, it's good. It's good to hear. What is your name, Mataji? Because I don't know your name. You asked me the question. I know everybody here. What's your name?
My name is Sharda Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, it was me who introduced her. I was going to speak to you later. If you can send her a link as well, I'll give you her details.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. So I'll just take a question here from the chat. It says, His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Swami says, be conscious when you are awake, but more conscious about when you sleep, to be aware of what you dream. Some dreams are interspersed with Krishna consciousness, while the bulk are filled with mundane things. So that worries me that my consciousness is so polluted, despite hearing a lot. So please, can you help on what I can do? So this is basically a question on how to manage sleep. The predominance of what we do during the day will carry over into what we are in the night. So there shouldn't be any specific efforts. There are ways and means for getting into meditations before we go to bed, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, reading very specific aspects of Krishna's Leela, etc. In talking about basic avatars in terms of the basic Leelas and basic, I would say, meditation, more absorbed meditation. All of this can be done before one goes to sleep. But what we are during the day is basically going to drive who we are in the night. So I would say, put more efforts during the day. That in turn should carry over into who we are in the night. You see? I want to just give an example, since you mentioned my spiritual master. Years back, I've shared this before. Years back, there was this very sincere Prabhupada disciple, Mataji, who was a pujari in Croatia. I think it was Croatia. And she was serving the deities wonderfully. She was a pujari for like years and years and years. And all in a sudden, she basically was hospitalized because she developed advanced cancer. So my Guru Maharaj, when he visited Croatia, she was in the hospital. So he decided to go and pay a visit to her. So because the moment he entered into the hospital room, it was a hospital. The moment he entered into the hospital room, he felt very powerfully connected because there was a very powerful, positive spiritual presence and aura in that particular hospital room, because hospitals in general are filled with the mode of ignorance. So he noticed that there was something very special about that room, where the Mataji was lying. She was basically under treatment. And then he went inside and he had a conversation because he was just wanting to find out how she was, and she was explaining to him that she has served the deities for years and years and years. And in all these years, this was the first time where she was not able to serve because she was forced to walk away because of her illness. But yet, as she lay on bed, she was actually engaging in Manasa Seva. She was engaging in Manasa Seva. She was engaging in Seva of the deities, very elaborate ritualistic ceremony Seva done in the mind of the deities. And because she was engaging in such powerful Seva in the mind, because she was engaging in such powerful Seva within the mind, the temple room was transferred from where it was to the hospital room. So quite fascinatingly, as the pujari was lying on the hospital bed, she had manifested the temple room. Literally, the deities were present there, and she was engaging in service. So there was a very powerful spiritual potency that was emanating when in that particular room, even though hospital rooms are well known for the mode of ignorance. So the point I'm trying to make is that what we do during the day can have an extraordinarily powerful effect, even if we are removed from the circumstances of that activity, because we have been absorbed in such powerful service for so many years and years and years and hours. What to say of dreaming in the same house if all we have done is chant and serve and think about service and read Srimad Bhagavatam? Yeah? We certainly would also be fully engaged. This Mataji had the ability to take the temple room and bring it into the hospital room. Yeah? Her service was so powerful that she could transport the temple room into the hospital room. And the hospital room became surcharged, just as a temple room would be, where the deities are being worshipped. Now, what to say of being able to do so at home, where we take care of deities and we do our chanting, we predominantly engage in service to the deities. So I would suggest focus on the day. The nights would take care of themselves. You could chant a few rounds before you go to bed. It doesn't mean that we chant the 16 rounds before we go to bed, but you can chant a few rounds in addition before you go to bed to set the stage. Even that is also a very powerful way to kind of engage all our senses and our mind before we rest. Even that would help. All right, so Okay, how to know if whether we have enough fear of losing the costless mercy that we get, and how to make sure we don't develop false pride, specifically when we don't have Guru to correct us directly. Basically, the point is that how to know whether we have enough fear of losing. One of the ways to know whether we have enough fear is to ensure that we don't commit offenses to other devotees. If we are offensive to the devotees, Vaishnava Aparad, if Vaishnava Aparad is taking place, understand that all the other 10 offenses are also taking place. Vaishnava Aparad is the first offense in the chanting of Harinam. The last offense is the desiring of material aspects, even though we have received so many instructions. What does it mean? The last offense in the chanting of Harinam is where we forget the instructions of the Lord, we forget our experiences. Otherwise, how would we desire things after receiving so many instructions? So, how do we know if we are afraid? The way we know we are afraid enough is when we do not commit any kind of Vaishnava Aparad, or we are very afraid to commit Vaishnava Aparad. If that barometer is maintained where we don't commit Vaishnava Aparad, then we are okay. Vaishnava Aparad occurs when we have false pride. False pride is already there because we are envious of the Vaishnavas. We are envious of the Vaishnavas because we have desires in the material world. And because we have desires in the material world, if someone else has achieved things that we don't have, we develop envy. And as a consequence, we become offensive to the Vaishnavas. So it's basically a very vicious cycle and circle. And what we need to do is recognize that if we are committing Vaishnava Aparad, if we are casual about Vaishnavas and their intentions towards us, please understand that we have no fear of losing what's being given to us. That's the way to find out. Yes, Shvetadvipa is also the reference that is given of the spiritual sky. Yeah, Shvetadvipa is also the reference given of the spiritual sky. So where is it located? It is basically the spiritual sky. Brahma shook his hands with the Lord. Is the Lord referred here is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu? If yes, it is said that Brahma is visualizing Vaikuntha abode. How is that Garbhodaka Vishnu is in Vaikuntha? Well, basically, the personality whom Lord Brahma is connected to is Garbhodaka Vishnu. Lord Garbhodaka Vishnu is within the universe just as much as the super soul is within our hearts, but yet the super soul is Krishna himself, who is transcendental to the surroundings that he is in. So he is visualizing Vaikuntha, he is also seeing the Lord. So for example, when we visualize Garbhodaka Vishnu, how would we visualize him? We would visualize him lying on Anantasesha, and then the mother goddess of fortune at his lotus feet. We would find a lotus coming from his navel. This is basically a Vaikuntha representation, even though he is within the universe because he's transcendental. He is not exactly within the universe by the sense of what I would call as being physically present. He is there where he's there, but he's again not affected by the surroundings of the material sky. So it is the Vaikuntha. So for example, we hear about Jaya and Vijaya basically falling down. How can Jaya and Vijaya fall down when they are in the spiritual sky? Yeah. How could you fall down if you're already in the spiritual sky? How could you forget your relationship with Krishna in the spiritual sky? We forget the relationship with Krishna if we are in touch with material energy. So the Kshirasagara, which is the outpost of Vishnu in the material ocean, in the material sky, is where this incident takes place. Yeah. So there is a Vishnu who is basically situated within the material creation, but it doesn't mean that he is not a part of the Vaikuntha realms. He is within the material universe. He is accessible. They say Kshirasagara. He is accessible to the devotees. We read about Lord Brahma and others going and offering prayers on the sands, or I would say the what we would call the perimeter of the ocean of milk, where Lord Vishnu is lying. basically it is within the material universe, but at the same time, he is in the spiritual sky. It is something where you have to understand that both possibilities exist. But Jaya and Vijaya, they are at the farthermost gate of entrance into that particular realm, in the sense that they are very much in touch with the material world. As a consequence, they fall down when they stop the Kumara brothers. So I hope this makes sense. Just remember the super soul who is within your heart, who is Krishna himself, who is definitely situated in the Vaikuntha planets. When you visualize him standing on a lotus, he is in the Vaikuntha planets, but he's also the localized version. You should understand it from that perspective, that even though he is supporting the universe by being in the universe, he is in the Vaikuntha planets itself. Does it make sense? I'm trying to give you an example which basically is basically connected to the super soul within our heart versus the super soul of the universe, who is Garbhodaka Vishnu, who is also basically the super soul of the demigods. And Lord Brahma is interacting with him. So he is in the Vaikuntha planets. Yeah? So that's what we need to understand. I hope this makes sense to you. If you have more questions, you could just write me.
Hare Krishna,
Was there a
Prabhuji, I have
question?
one question.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for wonderful lecture, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, does it happen that when in your altar there are, different forms of Krishna and somebody become more attached to one particular deity?
Yes, it's perfectly fine. There really isn't anything out of the ordinary if one is attracted to Jagannath and someone else is attracted to Radha Shamsundar. Someone else may be attracted to, Gopalji, if there is a Gopalji deity, and someone else may be attracted to Nrsingadev. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you had Narasimha Brahmachari, you had Pradyumna Brahmachari. These were all great Narasimha Bhaktas, but they were all devotees of Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya basically had to show them that he is non-different from Jagannath. He is non-different from Nrsingadev. So it is not an offense, it is sambandha.
Okay, and the sambandha, I don't know what the sambandha is, but sometimes all deities are, all we have longer relationship with the old deities, and we have, more reciprocations and guidance and mercy from that old deity, and I see, if I see the other deities, I see that they're also Krishna. They are non-different from. I'm more attached to my Gopal, I will say. So, and it is in terms of reciprocation, not swarupa.
In terms of reciprocal, okay, so you're basically saying that you have had darshan of the deities, you've rendered service, etc. As a consequence, you feel more connected to those deities because there is some kind of a service connection. Is that what you're saying?
Prabhuji, okay. The attachment to deities, the base of the attachment is the reciprocation, because they're old. My Gopal is old, and
okay.
I have Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra in altar, and they are also Krishna. I pray them, but my Gopal is old, and I feel more reciprocations from my Laddu Gopal, but my attachment is due to the reciprocation, not as a Swarupa that I like the Gopal
True.
form. Or,
okay.
Yeah.
I understand. So basically you're saying there is reciprocation, you have perceived a spiritual connection and reciprocation with your Laddu Gopal. That makes him more attractive to you because he's reciprocating with you, as opposed to Jagannath Ji, and you are basically neutral to how they are. It is just that the deities are basically reciprocating, so you're attracted. There's nothing wrong with it. So what I'm saying is, it's perfectly fine. Yeah, we would all reciprocate. We will all be very excited with the deities if we perceive there is a specific connection, there's a specific, inspiration, realization that we have, then we would all be very, very attracted to such deities as well. So yeah, I don't really see the, it's actually wonderful. It doesn't have to be, yeah.
So is it normal? And I mean, sometimes I feel like if, I mean, I don't know, I will be able to do it or not. I should, I mean, more serving. When I serve deities, I have more attraction and more bhava while arti, while offering, while, but and I pray to Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra too, because they are non-different from Gopal. They are also the same. So it's not offensive, or, you know.
No, it is not. No, there is no offensive at all. There's no offense. Sorry, there isn't any offense.
Okay. Thank
It
you.
isn't at all. Not at all.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol?
The question is more with the chanting. So when I chant in the morning, because it's an autopilot mode, because we've been doing it for so long, you get up at a certain time, you sit down, and the chanting happens. So you're listening, you're chanting, but at the same time, there is another strand of thought that goes while the chanting is happening, planning through the day, what needs to be done, what, emails need to run. I'm surprised how it happens, that chanting is happening, I'm hearing the chanting, I don't know how much I'm feeling, but another thought process is also happening at the same time, where I'm thinking, well, how do we kind of break this?
The multiple thought processes that exist in the mind are due to the quality of passion. So if there is the mode of passion and it interferes, then you don't have much control over the mind. If we are situated in higher levels of the mode of goodness, then the mind has no say in what we do and what we don't do. In other words, if one is situated in the higher mode of goodness fully, then they basically are not influenced by anything the mind does. The mind has no say in it. The mind is very silent. It is basically being interspersed. The falsifier has been, it has been dissolved. That's it. The mind has no say. This is basically a liberated state. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is, which is the objective of sadhana, is for us to reach the point of being able to reach what we would call as the point where there's no influence of passion and ignorance in our mental state. If the passion exists, then these different channels come up, where there's interference, there is, what do you call it? There is, different thoughts that come up, etc. And all of these are extraordinarily cumbersome. They're very cumbersome because you can't stop it. And then we end up doing things together. But it's a matter of us being able to elevate our consciousness to the mode of goodness. It's a matter of time. So please continue trying is what I would advise you to do.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Okay, there's a question from chat. While chanting, sometimes there is all of a sudden a flash of the form of the deity and it goes away. What can I understand from this? Is it my mind or just mercy? Well, mercy definitely can be there. So we don't want to be in denial of the fact that Krishna is there. We don't want to be in denial of the fact that Krishna is fully present in the spiritual sky in the form of Nam. So we don't want to be in denial of spiritual experiences. But we need to qualify the spiritual experiences and understand what they are. So we need to qualify it by way of being able to make a note of such experiences. And then whilst reading Shastra, if we do find such instances, then we know that we have seen something more real. So it has to be consistent. So sometimes as we are making progress, it is not consistent. It comes, it goes, it comes, it goes. Sometimes it's given as a gift to motivate. Yeah. and then afterwards we never see. So what I'm trying to say is we don't need to think that the mind is playing games. We can say very clearly that it is mercy because it's motivating us, because Krishna is definitely, in the spiritual sky. The process that is being given to us is real, but because it is not consistent, it means that we have sadhana to do. That's all it means. Is there any other question? Okay, there's a question in chat. Is there any difference between deities where pranapatishtha has been done and not done? Should we get pranapatishtha done after worshipping our deities for many years? Is there a difference between deities where pranapatishtha has been done? The answer is yes and no. Yes and no, because when pranapatishtha has been done, there definitely is a very distinct presence. But even that distinct presence depends on the bhav, the seriousness of the worshipper. So if I were to take this question, I would say take this answer and transport it to the situation where pranapatishtapana has not been done. If pranapatishtha has not been done, if we have a great level of, I would say, connection to the Lord through Nam, and we are receiving mercy, we have the ability to bring forth the presence of the Lord in a deity, even though pranapatishtapana has not been done. I'm sorry, I think, are you able to hear me, or is it, can someone confirm if you're able to hear me?
Yes, Prabhu, we're able to hear you.
Okay, so basically what I was just wanting to say is that pranapatisthapana not being done, but high level of reciprocation can still experience the presence of deities. Pranapatisthapana being done essentially is a very, very formal circumstance where great care has to be taken, and great care has to be taken in the maintenance of the deity and the worship and the standards, etc. So if you've been worshipping a deity at home, please continue worshipping the deity at home and concentrate on Nam, chanting of Harinam. The reciprocation of the deity at home, even if there is no pranapatisthapana, is going to depend on the mercy of Harinam. And that is a wonderful experience in itself, where one develops a deeper connection with the deity at home because they're chanting very nicely. Yeah? So I hope this answers your question. Pranapatisthapana need not be done for us to have reciprocation with the deities. But pranapatisthapana being done requires great formal worship, proper worship. So if you're at home and it is not very easy to maintain standards because there could be small kids and there could be interruptions, it is better not to do pranapatisthapana. Deities can manifest without pranapatisthapana itself. They can. They can manifest their presence in our lives without a formal worship standard being introduced through procedure and ritual. It entirely depends on the emotion and what we would call as the seriousness of the worshipper. Any other question or comment?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, I mean, at least like 3-4 times you mentioned about our behavior in the temple. Like as soon as we go to the temple, we take the obeisances, and then after some time we engage in talking to ourselves. Like sometimes, Prabhu, like now we are having Sunday Sangha also in our temple. So once we have the class, and once we have prasad, but doing some activity, we stay there, and then we end up talking to each other. Initially, it's only like devotional about your chanting or how is it going on, but later it comes to some other points as well. So how to have a control on that, Prabhu? Like,
how do you have control in terms of
avoiding any other talks? Because sometimes it happens that, okay, once we talk about chanting, once we talk about our class, the class we had on that day, and then we end up talking about how are you, how is
Sure.
your work, and those things we start talking about the work as well.
Sure. So basically, the idea of prajalpa, which is gossip, we can say that which is not connected to Krishna, is definitely a product of consciousness. If we make a concerted effort to recognize that we are in the presence of the deity, if we make a concerted effort to recognize that the deity is present, and which is a fact, by the way, it is a matter of consciousness. Krishna is fully present in the deity, and he fully reciprocates, and he basically reveals his eternal form through the deity as well. In other words, when we serve the deity, there are so many wonderful stories that you can hear from very sincere worshippers in terms of realizations. So the more and more we evolve in Krishna consciousness, then this consciousness that seeps in of being able to connect with the deity and the presence of the deity becomes more evolved. Yeah. So it's a matter of consciousness. How do you stop it? It is the same process as we would stop how we use our time, how we recognize the presence of the Lord, etc. There has to be some effort. It doesn't have to be informal to the point where it becomes extraordinarily restrictive, where we become fearful. But we need to recognize that there is Krishna in the deity form. That is not done, and it's experienced in the early stages of devotional service.
Thank you, brother.
Sure. See, there's a question here, but I would there's a question on what is your advice to total beginners? How do we start? The way we begin is to follow the advice of Srila Rupa Goswami, because we are Rupanugas, we are followers of Srila Rupa Goswami, who is one of the predominant Goswamis, or rather we are all his followers, who was on the planet 500 years back, and whose writings and whose presentations, along with his primary associates, there were 5 other associates, form the foundation for our inspiration in devotional service. His teaching basically evolves around being able to engage the tongue. Sevo unmukehi jihva ado. Seva unmukehi jihva ado. Jihva means the tongue. So he says, if you want to start seva, if you want to start the process of Krishna consciousness, start with the tongue. How do you start with the tongue? Then there is Golokera Premadana, Krishna Nam, right? Harinam Sankirtan. So Krishna in the form of his Harinam, Krishna in the form of Nam, his name, has descended directly from Goloka. And then he dances on a purified tongue that calls upon him. So to have Krishna dance on a purified tongue, we need to purify our tongue. So first principle, start with the tongue. If you want to start seva, service, start with the tongue. Purify the tongue by honoring Krishna Prasadam, sanctified food, spiritualized food that's been offered to the deities. You can learn the process. If you have anyone known to you in Krishna consciousness, they can show you how practically. Otherwise, there are umpteen number of videos, etc., where you could learn how to do this. But it is best if it is done with the help of others who are with you. Learn how to make offerings to the deity and accept the food that has been offered to the deity. That will purify the tongue. And after the tongue is purified, chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Then Krishna will dance on such a purified tongue. That's why we always start service with purifying our tongue and chanting of Harinam. That in itself is going to begin the journey. And once we start doing it, we find others who are also of a similar nature, and we associate with them to receive some inspiration and support. And then we also engage in seva along with them. So rendering some service using our limbs would be the next step. So we go to the temple, perhaps clean the floor, go to the temple, perhaps help with some of the services, and this automatically would just start a journey In one sense, you've already begun your journey. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So as a consequence, so the advice for beginners is to start with Seva Unmukehi Jihva Adav. Seva Unmukehi Jihva Adav. Yeah? So you can contact me via my website. I can put it down on chat. You can also come into the, I would say, the SoundCloud or the YouTube sessions. And then what we could do is I could introduce you to the WhatsApp group, and then we could take it up from there.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, one more question. Prabhuji, what should we tell our mind if our mind is looking fault in others? How should we remind and control our mind, from, doing that, seeing fault?
Yes, if the mind is finding fault, you see the ability to discriminate is an important function. We should always have the ability to discriminate. But when the discrimination goes beyond boundaries and starts finding fault with others, then there's too much energy, which basically is not helping us. As a consequence, what we must do is go and engage in menial seva. This is very important. And listen to kirtan. These are two things that we must do to pacify this mind, which is burning with the, I would say, energy of wanting to discriminate to the point where it wants to hurt others. Find fault.
Yeah, very nice, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Simple.
Very nice. Actually, I want to tell one one thing that yesterday, was hearing Gaur Gopal Prabhu. He told the same, same thing like that you are telling, giving a very nice analogy that in short, I will say one employee wanted to quit the office because of politics and all that. And the HR said, okay, you, before going that, you do one job that you walk 3 times around the building, just carrying one glass full of water. That was neck to neck full of water, and it should not spill. And then that devotee, not devotee, sorry, that man, he made 3 circles around the building, just looking the water should not spill. And then HR asked them, did you see any employee, making politics and bothering you? So I said, this is very much applicable that you said engage in devotion, devotional service.
I'm being very specific. I want to, again, I was very specific. Yeah. Very, very specific. Engage in menial seva. I'm using the word underscore.
Okay.
Menial seva. Engage in menial seva. Wash pots. Clean the floor of the temple. Yeah. Engage in very menial seva, not devotional service. Menial seva. That's number 1. Number 2, there's a need for kirtan. More kirtan.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you, Prabhuji,
Sure.
for making it more specific and more clear.
Yeah. Is there any other last question that I could take before we end today's session? One question. When you talk about seva and service in these sessions, do you just mean seva of deities in temple rather than seva of others in the general sense? Well, seva in general, when we talk about seva, what qualifies as seva is a higher level of Krishna consciousness. When there is a higher level of Krishna consciousness, it would encompass the entire creation. But depending on where we are, we want to engage in service as defined by the acharyas, the previous predecessors who are successful in the process. So the previous acharyas were successful. They have given us 5 pillars. One of them is to engage in sadhu sangha, which is to come in touch with those who carry faith in abundance so that they can give us immense faith. They encouraged us to engage in Nam Seva, which is basically to chant Hari Nam very sincerely and also engage in Kirtan. They encouraged us to hear Srimad Bhagavatam and also read Srimad Bhagavatam, but they had a greater emphasis on hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. They encouraged us to serve the deities. They also encouraged us to come to the Dham. So when I use the word Seva, I'm practically saying enhance the aspects of these 5 different pillars that were given by the predecessors. Yeah? But in real Krishna consciousness, as once Krishna consciousness increases and they see a deeper connection to the Lord to the point where they understand the relationship, then they become beneficial to the entire creation and beyond. And as a consequence, their actions cannot be minimized to either one person or the deity or the temple. It is their existence basically is a gift to the entire creation. So that's how it is. It's a matter of us being connected to Krishna. So the more deeper we are connected, the greater our ability to expand and contribute to the well-being of others. But how do we do it? There has to be some defined process. The defined process is what we do, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of coming in touch with the sadhus, chanting Bhagavatam, deities, and Vrindavan, etc. Yeah, that's how we do it. Because if we don't have a framework, then we are lost because we start thinking there's so much to do, what could we possibly do? So there's a very defined framework. Yes, there are many ways to do it, but you start here. Okay, one question here is feeling more connected to Guru more than Krishna an offense? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I wouldn't really say that feeling more connected to the Guru is an offense compared to, being more connected to Krishna. I wouldn't say that. It's a matter of us being able to single-pointedly focus on serving the Guru because he's representing Krishna, and then through his mercy, understanding Krishna consciousness fully. Yeah? One moment, yeah? I'm just trying to see if I missed some questions because I was just reading what came up here. How to safeguard oneself from the 6th Vaishnava Aparadh, to not feel joy upon seeing a devotee. Can we try to avoid Sangha of those who take Vaishnava relationships too casually? In one sense, absolutely. We need to be careful about whom we are associating with. But not to feel joy upon seeing a devotee is an offense in itself, because we are practically saying that we see nothing about that person which is good enough to bring joy to us, to connect them to Krishna. This is the opposite of the Nitya Siddha. This is the opposite of the Uttama Bhakta, where he will see Krishna everywhere. So as a consequence, it really is a different level of consciousness which should be worked upon. If you follow Krishna consciousness, does this mean we don't offer prayer to other forms of God as Lord Shiva? Not necessarily. In Vrindavan, we understand the relationship. We particularly become very clear. Vaishnavas are very clear about intimate connections of Krishna with the different personalities, his expansions such as Lord Shiva, the different devatas, human beings, etc. Greater level of Krishna consciousness means greater awareness of the relationships of everyone with Krishna. And though, as a consequence, no one is disrespectful. No one is. It doesn't mean that we don't pray. We pray after understanding the relationship of Lord Shiva with Krishna. We understand that Lord Shiva, when he is here in Vrindavan, if we want to enter into Vrindavan and experience Vrindavan without being overwhelmed by the material covering, we require his blessing. So if we first go to Gopeshwar Mahadev, we take the dust of his lotus feet upon our heads, we offer prayers to Mahadev, and then after offering prayers to Mahadev, with his blessings, we proceed towards Parikrama in Vrindavan. So in Krishna consciousness, I was giving you an example that we acknowledge the presence of the other servants of the Lord, we acknowledge Lord Shiva and his position, but we are very clear about his position. We respect him immensely because he is the greatest of all Vaishnavas. So we are not in doubt at all about his position. But how much do we understand? we understand because we are Krishna conscious. Okay, so I'm going to end here because it's almost 7 o'clock. So I'll end here and we will continue in a subsequent session. I thank you very much for joining me, and we will meet again in the following session. The following session, we will do the Chatushloki. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.